Today, I want to take us into starting to tie bass bugs. And so I'm going to begin with showing how to tie a feather tail. Here's what the tail looks like. You can see you've got the feathers splayed in the back. It's got a lot of feathers in there for texture. There's a hackle collar on it. And this is a pretty standard bass bug tail. I use the same tail on poppers, divers. You could just whatever deer hair head you want to put on front of it. Um, this tail works real well. And there's some things about this tail that I really like. One, I'm going to go through all the feathers I use, but the tail has a lot of texture in it, a lot of movement. Just even when it's sitting still, um, the feathers and the are moving. The tail part of this is moving around, and so it looks alive to the fish, and it's just been a very effective tail for me. And it's nothing. It's not, this style of tail and hackle have been around for decades. With going all the way back to poppers, pre-World War II poppers, from the 1930s and stuff. So this tail's been around a while. When I tie this tail, let me go ahead and set this one aside. When I tie this tail, I use a few different feathers, and I'll kind of go through the feathers that I use. So one of the feathers I really like is something called whiting bird fur. It comes off their spay birds, and I like these feathers. Let me show you one of them. This is a beautiful pewter colored grizzly. And this is a great looking feather. Let me get one here to show you what I like about it. When you look at it, if you look at the profile of this feather, you'll notice that it's tapered. Unlike a turkey marabou, which is very blunt. I want this feather to center on the tail, and I want it to have some barbules here that's going to have movement in the water, but I don't want to. I find that turkey marabou sometimes, as a centering material on the tail, overwhelms the fly. So I like this, or the other one I use is whiting superboo, which is a little bit more like turkey marabou, but it still has a little more taper to it. It's not quite as blunt a feather as turkey marabou. The feathers that I use for the actual wings, or I don't know if you want to call them wings, or the legs that come out, that splay out, are hen capes. The thing about these feathers here, this is a whiting black laced hen, and whiting. This is a great product. Whiting has them in stock. If your fly shop is a whiting fly shop, if they don't have them on their fly tying area, you can certainly ask them to order them for you. What I like about this one, and I'm going to use a red one here as well on this particular pattern. They come in a variety of colors. And what I like about these feathers, let me pull up an individual feather here. One of the things you can see when you look at this individual feather, it has a lot of webbing in it, which means when it gets wet, it's not just gonna taper down to a stem and be nothing at all. It's gonna stand up a little bit in the water. It's gonna give a little better profile to the water. Here's what it looks like in the white. These are the colors I'm going to use. All right. The other one I use is, I've just been using these recently, but they look really nice. This is, again, it's a cape, not the saddle. You don't want the hen saddles because the feathers are short and round. You want the hen capes because the feathers are longer. This is a grizzly saddle, a grizzly hen saddle. And if you look at the individual feather here, you'll notice it's got a lot of web in it. It's got a grizzly. It's grizzly, so it's a little different look to it. This feather isn't quite as dense a feather as the black laced hen. As you can see, the black laced hen is a denser feather. This one, but I use these in conjunction with, when I put these on, I'll mount them in conjunction with another feather, and you can see kind of the look that gives to it. So those are the wings, and then the collar, I'm using a wholly different kind of feather. This is a rooster cape. And the rooster capes, if you look at the feathers on the rooster cape, on the surface they might look similar to the hen, but when you take a feather off from here and you look at it, pull this one off, you'll notice there's not near as much web on it. And when you bend it, notice that the barbules come out. This is a great feather for a hackle collar. It's not a good feather for the legs because there's just not enough web in it. This feather, if you used it for the legs, it would get wet and it would just turn into a stem, and it would not have much of a leg at all. So this is the rooster. This is a saddle. This is a saddle with badger. This is another nice one. But again, if you pull a feather, you'll notice that there's not much web in there. So this feather here makes a great collar, hackle collar. Again, it's not a good feather for doing the legs. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's put a hook in here. And so the first thing I'm going to do always is to debarb. Okay, and I'll put the hook in. And then let's go ahead and let's begin tying a tail. All right, so let's start tying this tail on. And one of the first things I'm going to do, when we start working with the deer hair and we're packing hair back and stuff, it's real easy to push the tail around the bend of the hook. So the way I always start with the tail is I come in here with a little file and I just rough up the tail end area here a little bit. Just to give it just a little bit of tooth, not too much. You don't want to damage the hook too much. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Zap-A-Gap and I'm going to brush it in this tie-in area. And then I'll wrap my thread through that glue. Okay. So I'm going to put my thread on here. And I'll come back to the tie-in point. If I get my hook level, the tie-in point is going to be just if you drop the hook down, or the thread down, the bobbin down, the thread will come just in front of the point, and it's just kind of right here where this bend starts. Okay. And the tie-in area, if I come in here and I measure the point of the hook to the point of the barb, even though I've bent the barb down, it's about that distance right there, and that distance right there is where I want to tie my tail. I don't want my tail to stray forward of where the thread wraps are at. So I leave them there. I wrap this thread area, one, to kind of identify my tail area, but two, with the glue, it really locks the feathers in. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's start putting the tail together here. So I'm going to start on this one, and again, colors are whatever colors you want to be. But I'm going to start with some of this white bird fur. So I'm going to pick a few feathers here. Come in here. Now, one of the kind of interesting things about bird fur is this is a feather like any other feather. It's got a center rachis, just like all feathers have. It's got a center stem. You can see the stem down here, but the stem kind of disappears up in here. But this little piece right there, that is the stem. And so sometimes, if I want to, I can take that stem out because sometimes they're a little long. This one's not bad, but I'm going to come in and get that stem of that feather, and I'm just going to pull it right out of there like that. And now you can see I got more of just the little barbules, the little extended barbules. I'm going to do that to each of these feathers. I've got 3 of them here. So now when I put them together, I put them together so that the marabou parts kind of put together. Notice when you put a bunch of them together, notice the nice taper you get in that. So now I'm going to come. Now one of the things about this is I'm going to want to cut the front. I don't want to tie this in and then pull it up and cut it, because what will happen is I'll start making this sloped front end. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep the front end blunt. So now I'm going to take this, I square it off the front end. I'm going to match that to the front of my thread wraps, come in here and get a thread wrap and draw that right down. And having that super glue, that Zap-A-Gap in there, will help these feathers really adhere to that hook shank and the thread wraps that I wrapped over that glued area. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some flash, okay? Now, most of the lakes I fish are very clear water lakes. And so I don't over flash my flies. If I'm going to tie something specific for water that is, real tannin, like on the Tahquamenon River in Michigan, which is the color of a pretty strong tea, or if I'm fishing a reservoir, particularly like a western reservoir where the water has some silt in it and it's clouded up, I may add more flash. I'll put more flash in it. But I've found that flies that have a little more subtlety to them are better in clear water. A little flash is good. A lot of flash is just maybe too much. So now what I'm going to do is let's move the thread to the front of that tie-in area. And I'll show you why I do that. So I'm going to take my flash, I'm going to wrap it around my thread like this, pull it back, and I'm going to draw it right down to the tail. Come in and just get a loose wrap or two to start with. Now you can see that flash is sitting on top of the hook shank. I'm going to take it and I'm going to push it around so it more encompasses this feather. Kind of wraps it around. Now I can kind of grab it and get some good wraps coming back. Tie it in place, pull it all back, and trim it just a touch longer than your feather. Okay, now I like to bury the flash inside the beginning of this tail with the bird fur or the super boo. So let's go ahead and let's get a couple of feathers here. This is the pewter gray one I showed you earlier. Now you can really see on these ones, see there's the rachis, I'm going to take it out. There's the rachis on this one, I'm going to take it out. And there's the rachis on that one, I'm going to take it out. Now, when I stroke this back, I have this nice little marabou tail there with these other strands that continue on going back over. So I'm going to clip that, lay this right on front, matching the front up, come and grab that wraps, grab that there, and then come forward and backwards. Let me wrap forward just a little bit. Okay. Now, one of the things you want to do when you're doing these tails is you want to maintain this little tuft right here. Don't go wrapping over top of that. Leave that there, because that's going to be like a little buffer for your thread. Hopefully that's what it'll be, like a little buffer for your thread. And it won't allow your thread to slip down off this tail end area. You want to keep everything right there. So keeping that little tuft right there is kind of important in keeping the materials where you want them and preserving the front of the hook shank for your hair work later. So now I'm going to come in, I'm going to take one of my grizzly feathers, one of my red, black, lace tan, and one of my white, okay? And my white, since my belly's going to be white, I'm going to make the white the inside color on the leg, and then the grizzly will be the outside. Now there's no magic to that. You can arrange the colors however you want. I don't know that it matters from fishing, but typically when I think about a bass bug, whatever my belly color is going to be, I try to make that the inside feather of the tail of the three tails, okay? And what I'm going to do it off camera here, but I take this feather and I lay it on the curve of my leg, and then I put the next feather on top of it, matching the tips, and then the third feather. And typically I use 3 feathers for this wing. So let me go ahead and do that. Just do it off camera here. Okay, so now you can see I've got them married together. Let's make this one just a touch longer. There they are. So I match up the tips. I want to match up the tips. And I'm going to rotate this over because I can put it on the outside. So you can see the white one is the inside. When I put it on like this, the white will be the inside feather. And then I'll have the black laced hen red as my middle feather. And I'll have the grizzly as my outside feather. Again, you could use all black laced hen. You could probably use 3, or maybe I might even, if with the grizzly, since it's not quite as dense, I might use 4 on a side. I wouldn't go past 4 though. And then I want to make the tail about 2 times the length of the body. So I'm going to put the tail right in there. Now notice that on this one, I don't cut it off. And the reason I don't is because when I put this in here and I wrap and I pull it in, what I've done is I've gathered all those extra fibers, where if I cut it off, I might not have those. So I've gathered all those extra fibers for the tail. Then I take the stems, I come right up in here, right tight to that flat section, and I cut the stems off. Now I'll come back in here, kind of hold them in place. The other thing doing it like that, I find, tends to keep the feathers a little straighter. They don't want to roll around quite as much. You don't want to tie, if you tie in the feather with just the stem, they'll tend to want to roll around on you. Okay, so let's do that on the near side, on my side of the, here. And I'm basically doing the same thing. I'm stacking these feathers. There's my grizzly, which is my outside, and there's my white, which is my inside. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this feather tail, match up the tips, and that'll automatically get the feather as long as I want it. So that first feather I put in is kind of setting me up with the tail length. And then the second one, I can just match that length and just make sure they're even on each side. So now I'm going to come in and wrap forward, but not all the way. Keep that little tuft there in front. Come wrap back. And there we go. So now if you look at it, you can see the tail has a little bit of a V shape to it. And you've got the feather started. You notice you've got these extra fibers in here, which are going to give you some nice movement. And so now I'm going to put a collar on it. So I'm going to select, I'm going to use this badger. This is a badger, red dyed badger, which got that black center. So let me get a couple of those rather than using the grizzly that I showed you. I kind of like the red badger. So let me pick a few feathers here. And as far as barbiole length goes, you know, the barbiole length can be maybe to the gape of the hook, to maybe a gape and a quarter. You know, there's not, you don't need to, they don't function the way like a standard dry fly. Like if you're tying Catskill dry flies, where you've got to really measure the barb length and make sure it's 1.5 times, or about a 1 1/4 to 1.5 times the gape of the hook to get the fly to sit properly on the water. That doesn't happen here. All this is I'm just adding some feathers to give me some more texture and movement. And as I've done with other feathers, you'll notice that I come in, I clip top and bottom, I create this little brush here on the stems. Now I'm going to tie these in wet fly style. I'm going to put the curve towards the hook. And then come in here, grab those stems, get them tied down. Okay, let me clean this up a little bit. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little Dave's Flex Cement. And what this really is it's goop cement, and it's thinned out with toluene, which is a pretty nasty substance. You don't want to leave it around where you're going to be breathing the fumes. I keep mine out in the garage and just go out and add a few dropperfuls to this bottle to keep it thinned out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to use my little needle stick here, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of glue and put it right on the thread wraps there and let it kind of soak in. And now I'm going to come in I'm going to grab those feathers I tied in. I'm going to take the outside one, put my hackle pliers on it, and I'll wrap it right over. Let me advance my thread to the front of that area. Wrap it right over and through that glued section. And then I'm just going to try one wrap here. I want to be careful and don't pull too hard in the thread so it slips off the front. Ideally, you want to keep it up there. So now I'll wrap this one. You can see I'm just adding to the density in that hackle collar. And again, just one wrap around, keeping it right behind there. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to get this one. And normally I find 3 feathers will do it. The thing you can do with this too is you can mix colors. You know, if you want to, if you got, you know, I could have mixed some white into this if I'd had a white cape. So that's probably about enough. Come in and get one wrap. And then I'm going to come in here. I'm going to clip out those tips, those feather tips. Then I'll come in, I'm going to get 1 or 2 more wraps here, but keep them gentle. Don't pull hard on them, because if you do, you're going to taper that front end. Now I'll come in right in front of where those materials are tied in, and I'm just going to use my hands. I'm just going to do a whip finish right here. I don't need to add any glue to this, because when I come back and do the hair work, the glue will be added. So there you can kind of see, you can see the V, you can see the texture in it. You got the hackle collar going. I've kept everything right on that tie-in area. So now when I come back and I do my body, you know, I'll have this tail and I'll put the body right up here. And the hackle collar, whether it's a popping bug, the hackle collar will be pretty prominent. If it's a diving bug, the hackle collar will kind of mix in with the hair collar on it. But again, it's kind of the standard feather. That's what I do. That's kind of a standard feather tail on a bass popper. So this will be part 1. I'll continue and do another video on doing the hair work, and then probably a 3rd video on trimming and finishing the fly. So again, if you haven't done so, please hit subscribe, and I will be posting up more videos, both fly tying videos and some tackle and rigging videos, as well as we move into summer, I'll be doing some casting videos as well. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.